Hello, and welcome to another edition of Megami Tensei Rankings. Now, I've looked at Persona fan projects before, like when I took a look at Scruffy Turtle's Persona 5 ACAU. So I'd like to use today to take a look at another set of unique fan-created personas by looking at all of the initial personas from Persona Behind the Mask. For those of you that are unfamiliar with it, Behind the Mask is a Persona-themed death game story made by some giant loser that nobody cares about. Instead of using their personas to fight, the cast of Behind the Mask uses their unique abilities to try and solve murders, and it could be oversimplified by describing it as Dungus Rungus, but with Persona users. The inspiration for the series came from the creator really liking the idea of Persona Cross Detective Naoto telling a Persona story where the characters had purely non-compatible abilities, but wanted to hopefully tell a story that didn't, suck as bad as Detective Naoto did. There are supposedly plans to eventually get a small demo out there to help introduce people to the world and characters of Behind the Mask in a more interactive fashion, but blame the creator and his dumb, stupid idiot face for spending way too much time making YouTube videos and not actually writing a script or learning how to make video games. The personas themselves, though, are awesome, and the artwork was handled by the very talented Frog Fairy, which is great, because without his efforts, we wouldn't really have anything to look at today. But they do a lot of really awesome Persona stuff, and they're well worth checking out. But alright, that's enough exposition. Let's get these totally unbiased opinions out of the way as I look over the 10 initial personas from Persona Behind the Mask. And that means starting off with our main character, Kosuke Nishimura, and his persona, Sweeney of the Temperance Arcana. Now, I absolutely dig this as a protagonist persona. The bronze mask and flaming hair just look great, and I love the little details like the barber pole stripes, the razor fingers, and the string of pearls around his neck that all tie nicely into its source material. I feel like it's always extra important for the main character's persona to have a little bit more oomph, and Sweeney's got that oomph. I'm gonna give this one an S tier, just to go ahead and start us off on a high note. Then there's Nozomi Takagi and their persona, Mad Gasser of the Lover's Arcana. I remember in some of the early concept drawings, this persona was meant to be a lot bulkier, almost like a headless knight, but Frog Fairy's take on this and giving it a more svelte form really makes it look creepier and more unsettling, and I love it. The bright red helps it pop, and I am a sucker for that bright lime green style of poisonous gas. It's just the perfect way to convey that in my opinion. My favorite detail on this one is how the fingers feel trapped under the tight leather on the mask halves, and it really works well for this character. Mad Gasser is an S-tier design, no doubt about it. Next up is Taichi Nomura and his persona, Christie-Cleek of the Moon Arcana. I think I've mentioned before that I'm usually a fan of personas that do something to deviate from the more traditional bipedal humanoid figure, which this one arguably still is, but that distinct posture makes it a lot more unique and disturbing in an awesome way. I love the use of wood textures and raw meat on this one. I love that it has elements of marionettes, rocking horses, cutting boards, and knife blocks, and the metal hook ties into the horrific backstory of this persona's origins. I really like this design, though I've gotta say, it makes me want to skip the steak and stick to salad. And speaking of that sentence, I think an S tier is super fair for this design. Then we've got to check out Aimi Osawa and McVee of the Devil Arcana, and I know what you're all thinking, and you're right. If there isn't at least one character with giant boobs and cleavage you could lose your car keys in, is it really even a death game story? I often bring up color when talking about personas, and I adore the colors on this one. The emphasis of gold works for the backstory, and the fishnets bring a touch of gold to every inch of this persona's body. On top of that, I really love how the mountain mine parasol turned out. Many personas have designs that conceal their eyes, but sometimes the creepiest mask is just the veil of darkness itself, and I love it. I'm gonna mix things up a little bit here, and I'm gonna go with an S tier. Yep, my hands are tied on this one. Alright, now this one is actually one of my favorite designs, Katsuhirai and Don Vincente of the Star Arcana. The backstory here is that he sought after rare books but never read them, so I really love the attention to the locks and chains preventing anyone from ever reading them. The flames tie nicely into the story, and the bright blue really pops, it stands out, I like it. I'm also a really big fan of the stole being a book ribbon. Honestly, the main elements of this design work together really, really nicely, so yeah, I think we're just going to call this one an S tier and move right along. But enough clowning around, because next up is Etsuko Uehara and Shotgun Man of the Strength Arcana. Right off the bat, I am a huge fan of the color contrast here. Etsuko's bright, vibrant rainbow of colors in her slasher design is such a departure from the nearly monochrome persona. Shotgun Man has this solid blend of being both a mime and a rodeo clown, which works because that's the type of clown that would probably be most likely to have a gun. If you remember my favorite joke from Persona 3 for the win, you know I'm a sucker for a well-placed bang flag, so this Persona design just works for me. It earns this S tier ranking from that alone, I tell you what. Then we have Suzume Natsuki and Black Agnes of the Hanged Man Arcana. Now, this one I love for sort of the opposite reason as Shotgun Man. Given Black Agnes's backstory, you'd think there'd be a lot more dark and drab colors, but the bright pastels and that 50s era creepy Stepford Wives smile stand out a lot to me, especially next to the nearly pure black look of her wielder. The tartan plaid ties into her mythology nicely, and I can't help but laugh at the cartoony meatloaf design on the apron that's both aww and So yeah, dust off the letter of the day because an S tier is the only dish I'm serving tonight when it comes to Black Agnes. I've always felt that cold, unfeeling machines are an underappreciated aspect of horror, and that's the vibe I get from Sumie Aoyama's persona, Phantom of the Hermit Arcana. I am a big fan of how this design feels both old and new, with the old CRT monitor and dot matrix printer paper, but with the, cat ear headphones and electric lights strewn throughout the coat. The DNA strands give off almost tentacle-like vibes, and are a hilarious outcome of the Phantom of Hylderon case this persona is based on. You can see on her printer paper the 4 unique letters of the DNA molecule ACGT spread throughout the paper, so I'm going to give this one the highest rank available from those letters, and give her an A. Actually, I'm just kidding, this is totally an S-rank persona. Hayate Yokomizo and Red Spider of the Adjustment Arcana is a really fun and interesting design to me. For the record, Persona Behind the Mask had a tokusatsu-based twink long before Persona 5X hit the scene. I just think it's fair to get that out of the way now. Red Spider having a design that makes it look like a classic costume from a hero you'd see in a show from the 60s or 70s makes it really unique to me, and I love the different elements of trains that went into it. As a fan of Gridman, or as I knew it growing up, the Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, I have a certain level of fondness for this Persona design and the inspirations that went into it. And yeah, you probably guessed it by now, it's an S-tier design. I just think it deserves that. And lastly, we have our adorable little mascot character, BB, and his persona. Alright, and there you have it, all 10 initial personas from the delightful fan project Behind the Mask. I hope you're all excited to eventually play the game, if it ever actually comes out, and get to know these characters and their personas to see what they're capable of. So, who was your favorite persona we talked about today? Are you excited for the project? Let me know all about it in the comments below, and I've left a link to the official Behind the Mask Twitter page in the description if you'd like to follow it for any updates. Thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, take care.